If you have ever dabbled with family history, like me, you'll probably know how elusive details of female ancestors can be. Virtual brick walls often obscure their lives. Well, in patriarchal societies, they were naturally of secondary importance, the mere goods and chattels often of husbands and fathers. Any insights about them have to be picked out between the lines of records and certificates, documents, if there are any, of course. And that's nothing new. In the whole of St. Mark's short gospel, Jesus' own mother merits only one name check, that in today's Bible passage. There is no mention of her eldest son's birth or childhood. It's not clear whether she was present at his execution or a witness to his burial. Neither is what happened to her. Nevertheless, while Mark is most concerned with revealing Jesus' true father, it's taken for granted that nobody could exist at all without a mother. And in this case, although she is kept well out of the spotlight, this mother's story will soon arouse curiosity, as we can see from the other Gospels, not to mention millions of later Christian devotees. As the grown-up Jesus went public, his mother Mary was still there somewhere in the background, even if teasing her story out is somewhat more of a challenge. You have to let them go, you know, even if it goes against every fibre of your being. The first is always the hardest. Yes, Joe and I had younger children, James and Joe, and Judas and Si, and the girls, but he was my firstborn. That made him special enough. But it's not the half of it. I know every mother thinks their baby can walk on water, but mine literally could. An extraordinary life was awaiting him. I always knew it. I don't want to dwell on how he came about. Joseph and I, we weren't married then. We almost weren't at all, because the child wasn't his. But Joseph got over it, more or less. He was a good man. Parents make their worst mistakes with the first one. Obviously, they've no idea what they're doing. But Jesus was no trouble. Not really. Not until, that is, he abandoned his late father's carpentry business and struck out on his own. I understood, even then, that was what he was born for. But I didn't entirely get it. How could I? Even if I'd watched him pull off 2 or 3 astonishing party tricks. It wasn't as if anyone else in the village, maybe the whole of Galilee, could claim their son's profession was miracle worker. Even preachers and teachers were hardly 10 to the denarius. We had done our best with him, but he was always, well, non-standard. Most parents struggle to drag their sons into the synagogue or the temple. We could hardly get ours out. I know Joseph was hurt when he kept calling it my father's house. And he was only a nipper then. How did he know? God was all he thought about. Still, he had the decency to wait until Joseph was gone before he became a man on a mission. That was when, well, really when, my letting go began. He'd disappear for days at a time, and then one day he came back with a whole tribe of rough and ready helpers in tow. And then I started hearing stories about him at the wellhead or in the marketplace. Embarrassing to be the last to know, though I never let on. I suppose he could have been drinking, gambling and womanising, rather than healing the sick and arguing with religious fanatics and rabbis. But that doesn't mean that it was easy. I couldn't help being worried. His younger brothers, they backed me up. I suppose they had their fair share of leg pulling, or possibly worse. Jesus was causing a stir. Crowds of people seemed to flock to him. Couldn't miss that. He was making friends, but the wrong kind of enemies too. Synagogue leaders, professional prayers. They were powerful in our community. And then, well, you wouldn't want the Romans getting involved. It felt bad that day when we tried to make out that he was just bonkers, when some people started saying he was possessed. But I was scared. We all were. And it was upsetting that we seemed to be nothing to him, or at least only on a par with those who pleased his father. When he came home to Nazareth, well, I thought things would be better. People knew him, knew us all. But somehow it seemed to make it worse. Tcha! He's some jumped-up carpenter's boy, that's all. As if they had his number. Proper put him off his stroke. He could barely do anything except for healing one or two minor illnesses. I remember him looking straight at us when he said about prophets not being honoured by their own kin. That was like a dagger to my heart. Really, it wasn't that I didn't believe in him. I just wanted him to be safe, to survive. Being in his shadow, that never mattered to me at all. A woman of no importance. Well, aren't we all? But before I'd even left my parents, I realised that my entire life's work would only amount to things that were consumed or burnt or torn or worn out or dirtied. Was it so wrong to hope for one radiant and lasting legacy? He wasn't mine to protect. Not anymore. He really was his father's son. It wasn't that we didn't honour his unique and amazing gifts, or his dangerous calling, even if we couldn't fully understand then. Stranger though he always was, I just loved him. If St. Mark's Gospel had been the only one to survive the millennia, we would know practically nothing about the mother of Jesus. For him, like the people of his hometown, the big family history enigma was, where did this man get all this? Who exactly was Jesus' father? Clearly not the village carpenter, as friends and neighbours had assumed. What wisdom he had, what deeds of inexplicable power he had achieved elsewhere. They pointed to an unprecedented, incomprehensible paternity. But still, the shadowy figure of his mother hovered behind him. She had personally supplied his human frame, clothed the Holy Spirit with flesh and blood. She made it possible with a simple yes for his limbs and organs to be knit miraculously together in secret. And Mary Plain was never invisible to a God for whom darkness and light are both alike. Paradoxically, it was humility, the absence of self-promotion, which ultimately would make Mary probably the most famous woman ever. Largely unremarked in real time, she was magnified by faith to become more visible and enduring than she could ever have imagined.